Welcome to my webcast. My name is Eric Bowers. My artist name is The Golden Repair. And I'm delighted to have Bruce Sanguin with me today. When I first came up with this idea of doing interviews, Bruce, you were one of the first people that I thought I would really like to interview Bruce. And so this is it. And as I was just saying to you, I think when my dreams and my authentic self starts emerging, there's a phase of working that out with the false self. And I think somehow that gets expressed through technical difficulties. And so thanks for persevering.
Wow. Good to be here.
Yeah. So I am going to tell you the life story that I know of you and ask for different things along that journey that have been sitting with me because I've heard your story a couple times in a couple different ways. And the thing I don't remember, or maybe I haven't heard yet, is where did you grow up?
I grew up, I was born in Kindersley, Saskatchewan, and I spent 5 years there with on an oil rig with it's where my father was working at the time. And so we spent the first 5 years of our life there. And two other siblings, and then moved to Winnipeg and grew up in Winnipeg.
Okay.
Till I was like 21 or so.
Yeah. And am I right that you went to university mainly because you wanted to play high-level volleyball? Do I remember that right?
Yeah, it had University of Winnipeg had the best volleyball team in Canada, and so that was essentially my motivation.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, while I was playing varsity volleyball, I got a degree.
Yeah. Okay. I love that because I was a huge athlete growing up too, and thought that football would take me into university. Actually, I was, this is when I was 12 or 13.
All right.
Yeah. And then when you graduated, you were going to become a Zamboni driver, right?
Well, I tell this story just to illustrate that I didn't have a lot of ambition.
Yeah.
And it's not like I came for whatever reasons from a family that ever sat me down and said, okay, what are you going to be when you grow up? Right. And everybody started thinking about this. And so, my summers were spent working for the city of Winnipeg, Parks and Recreation, or in construction. And so I never really aspired to much beyond being a Zamboni driver, cleaning the rink between periods.
Yeah.
But the first time actually anyone really got seriously interested, I was going to church at the time, and there was a minister at St. Stephen's United, I remember, in Winnipeg, who after the service brought me in and said, okay, I figure you should be a doctor, a lawyer, or a minister, and you need to choose. And so I kind of looked at him and said, well, I guess minister. And so he happened to have, for some reason, an application form for a graduate university in Toronto, at the University of Toronto. So that was how it kind of happened. Weird.
So wasn't there also another minister you saw that was quite inspirational as well in his speaking, or am I forgetting the detail there?
Well, leading up to that meeting with the minister at St. Stephen's that I just described, I, in my last couple of years of undergraduate at University of Winnipeg, I started into transcendental meditation and was thinking seriously about applying to sort of advanced level. But my mother convinced me that I should go hear this Anglican evangelist. And and I went, and it was there that I heard that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one came to the Father except through him. And so I bit.
Yeah.
And went fully down that road for a couple of years, and that's ultimately what made me decide that I'd be a minister. If Jesus represented the meaning of life, I was a meaning freak, and so I would just go down that road. And see if I could find the meaning. And so I ended up at seminary for 4 years, seeking the meaning of life.
Yeah.
And then I think it was the 4th year of this graduate program, with 3 months left to go, it dawned on me that I was actually there training to lead a congregation and not figure out the meaning of life. And I kind of freaked out. I actually deferred ordination. And with that deferral of ordination, I started taking courses in a psychotherapy program, which is where I got all my accreditation way back then, before I actually got ordained. But then chose the church.
Yeah. And the psychotherapy training, was that inspiration the same out of wanting to have meaning and understand how life works, or was it?
I think ultimately it was. It was partly because I was looking for an excuse not to lead a congregation, because I was young and I didn't have that much confidence. Yeah. And I had always been interested in psychology. That was my undergraduate degree. So in a sense, it was like an extension of that. But there again, I read a chapter in the book about the pursuit of the meaning of life. I suspect that partly what psychotherapy was about was this search for meaning.
Right.
Actually, wasn't that at all, but we can talk about that in a bit.
Which reminds me, this is your latest book here, the one you just referenced, Dismantled.
Thank you.
And I'm just starting into it.
Mm.
I love the title alone, Dismantled, How Love and Psychedelics Broke a Clergyman Apart and Put Him Back Together. Right. So I want to get to that. But before that, you were 27 years as a United Christian minister. Is that right?
Yeah, United Church of Canada is the denomination.
United Church of Canada.
It's a so-called progressive denomination, whatever progressive means. But it's Christian, into social justice, gay and lesbian and transgender rights. So very open denomination.
Right.
As a matter of fact, this denomination has just decided, it's the first denomination, I think, in the history of Christianity, who said it's okay for an atheist, for a leader of a congregation to be atheist.
Oh, wow.
That's
fantastic.
It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of nonsensical to me.
Yeah.
But, taking this inclusivity as a mantra to ridiculous degrees.
Yeah. So 27 years, successful minister, you published several books and your books are around the theory of the evolution of spirituality, right?
Yeah, I kind of got known for evolutionary spirituality, and what I did was I really went deep into the conversation between science and spirituality.
Okay.
Said that they didn't have to be opposed to each other if you stripped the neo-Darwinian paradigm of that evolution is all about survival of the fittest, and it's a strictly materialistic kind of winding up of matter into mind, into consciousness. And if you assume that spirit was already implicit in this story of evolving reality, then what came online was what I called evolutionary spirituality. And then I interpreted the Judeo-Christian tradition through this lens of spirituality, through this lens of evolutionary spirituality.
Wow, there's a whole lot there we could explore, but I really want to get on to your post-minister life. Before we go to the post-minister, though, I just want to frame this picture that we're painting as minister, author, public speaker, traveling, and father and husband in what convention would tell us is a very successful picture.
Yeah, I was like, in some ways, the poster boy for success. I had a definite spiritual spent, and yet, ever since I was young, I kind of had the nickname growing up as the Golden Boy.
Yeah, right.
Good athlete, good student. Um, and then I started into my career and was the minister of 3 quote unquote successful congregations. And, I had that kind of status confirmed again and again that
Yeah.
I was quote unquote successful.
And did you have periods of where you questioned your life or your success, quote unquote, did it feel like this is what it's meant to be and I'm on track?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was actually, after about 10 years of ministry, I went through a period of, what some call the dark night of the soul, where the basic tenets of Christianity, as I knew them, didn't hold much weight for me. And I was having to get up week after week and preach from a place of serious doubt about how Christianity made any kind of sense. And what I did is I went away for a 10-day retreat, silent retreat. And that's where I had this awakening that gave birth to my version of evolutionary spirituality. And then,
Right.
and then my faith, I guess you'd say, my spirituality was rekindled because I felt like through this new iteration of spirituality, I could find relevance and do church in a new way.
Right.
But there was that period of doubt where I just about, I was on the verge of leaving the church at that time. After this experience, which was I would say it was kind of a genuine awakening experience. Then I was once again, fairly passionate about what I was doing, and I was engaged, and things took off again. So yeah.
And the 10-day retreat was that in the wilderness? Was that at a where what was that?
It was actually at a convent in Narragansett, Rhode Island.
Okay.
And what happened is I read a book by a cosmologist and physicist whose name is Brian Swim about the nature of the universe. And this was my first experience, I would say, of realizing that there's no separation between me and the universe, that I am and you are and we all are the presence of the universe after 14 billion years of evolution, with the capacity for conscious evolution. In other words, in, through, and as us, natural selection has become actual selection. We had the capacity to actually select a future, which may distinguish us in some ways from other species.
Okay. So this 10-day retreat really informed this new truth for you, this new area of exploration, that there's no separation between you and the universe. The presence of the universe is evolving through you and through us, through humans.
Yeah, exactly. This was the lights kind of turned on. So
Yeah.
it was I feel grateful. I had a genuine, I suppose you could call it, mystical experience of
Okay.
unitive consciousness.
And how old were you?
At this point, I'd be 40.
40. Okay.
Yeah.
You were going to say more about your mystical experience?
No, I was just, that's, we could go into it more, but, it would probably take us away from this. It was just like, I realized that I was that which I had been seeking all my life. I was the presence of that in human form, having this human experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, so 17 more years then, right? As a minister after that, roughly, or
Yeah, a little more than that,
a little more
actually.
than that?
I stayed a couple of years in that church, and then I went to this church in Vancouver, Canadian Memorial, and I was there for about 18 years. So
Yeah,
about 20 more years.
yeah. And so cutting to the near the end of that time, what I've heard you say before is, you didn't feel an integrity in your marriage, and you really needed to be honest about that and
Yeah,
walk away from it,
yeah.
which
Yeah,
also led to the walking away from the church at the same time, essentially. Is that right?
yeah, that's right. I made a decision that my marriage was over. I felt like maybe it had ended sometime before that. I just didn't have the courage to name it and act on it. And then I announced this in the congregation. A small handful of people didn't like it, and they started doing strange things. And I realized that I was already on my way out. I had moved from full time to half time so that I could honor more speaking engagements that I was getting invited to. And
Right.
so I just made the decision that
Yeah.
it was time to leave.
Yeah. And so I'm really curious about what led you to your first plant medicine experience, and also in the context of the fact that you'd never done any up to this point, right? You'd been
No,
no psychedelics, no plant medicine. Now you're in your late 50s. You've
yeah.
left you left your wife, you've left your job, your career. Where does all of a sudden Bruce decide, hey, I'm gonna do some plant medicine? Or
It's a great question. No, it's a wonderful mystery of how these things, how these the next legs of our journey come to us. But I think I was at a party. Someone mentioned that they were going to an ayahuasca ceremony. I made inquiries. I got on a newsletter list, and suddenly I found myself at an ayahuasca ceremony. Um, there's a bit of a backstory to that as well. That's in the subtitle. It's like how love and psychedelics.
right.
And by this time, I had found the woman that I regard as my soulmate, and we're now married. And but I found that I wasn't really fit for a relationship. Like there were aspects of my shadow that were coming up and sabotaging and getting in the way of a deeper intimacy.
Yeah.
And so there's a way in which I was kind of driven to get at what that was about.
Yeah. Just want to welcome Sue to the webcast. Hi, Sue. And if you have any questions, please type them in. And otherwise, we'll just keep chugging along here. So you realized, I think the words you say, you weren't fit for this kind of soulmate relationship, and you wanted to take responsibility for that, explore that. You hear about ayahuasca. Do you remember that first ceremony? What stands out from you for this is your first ayahuasca, first psychedelic experience of your life, really?
Yeah. Well, it was it was a profound experience. For one thing, I loved the ceremonial aspect of it. Being someone who had facilitated ceremony all my life, this felt like the real deal.
Right.
Where, real transformation was taking place, and you could feel it in the room, especially when the medicine came on. And I had set as my intention that any obstacles to love be removed. It was somewhat of a naive intention, I think, Eric, because I don't think I realized how many obstacles there were. So, after some beautiful transcendent experiences of just really kind of being dropped or elevated to the heart and mind of Source, the great mystery, then it got serious. Then it was like, then the work began.
Yeah.
And as you know, this ayahuasca intelligence can be a loving but stern taskmaster. And she drove me to my knees, literally, and
Yeah.
to the bucket that was in front of me. And she taught me a few lessons right off the bat about humility. If this successful Bruce, who thought he was quite somebody, got stripped down pretty quickly early on in the ceremony.
Yeah. I
You
have my own memories and just really, resonating with what you're saying. Humility seems to be a strong theme in mine as well. Stripping away. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, ayahuasca is a purgative, so you do a lot of releasing from both ends. You know, what people would recognize as vomiting, and then, maybe diarrhea, maybe yawning, shaking. But for me, there was a lot of purging out, my stomach pain. And the medicine taught me very early, said, don't think of this as throwing up. Think of this as an offering to me.
Right.
What you're offering is everything in you that is not love. And I will take it and metabolize it for this higher purpose.
Yeah.
So out it all came.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aspects of my false self, energies that I was carrying that didn't belong to me, attitudes of arrogance, cynicism, pessimism, judgmentalism, hatred.
Yeah.
Over time, they all had to come out of me so that I could see clearly things that I was carrying. But if you had asked me if I was carrying these before the ceremony, I would have denied it. I didn't know it. I just simply didn't know what was going on with me.
Yeah, there's so much there. There's a few different directions, but maybe I want to go in the matrix direction when you say I don't know. And yeah, just wondering if, as you look back on yourself over the minister years as the poster boy, the golden boy, I think the very successful. I've heard you use the term high functioning and broken hearted as a term for yourself and for many people in the world who just look like they're very high functioning, but underneath the surface, they're broken hearted. And I'm wondering, if there was a way that you could have been invited to see that more clearly prior to when you discovered it. In other words, it usually takes some big life event for us to have the choice to, we're going to dig in here and take a hard look, or we're going to keep avoiding. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I've been asked this before. What would it have taken without medicine, or could it have happened without the medicine? I'm not sure that it could have. For me, for others, I'm sure there are other ways. I'm a psychotherapist, so I think that some people kind of maybe have more, are less repressed, less in denial than I was.
Right. Yeah.
So, but for me, I just needed big medicine so that I could see myself with this kind of clarity.
Yeah.
But I think it was all part and parcel there. I mean, it just wasn't, the medicine is like, I put my life in crisis. When I left my marriage, when I left my career, when I left the security, all of that, I left my community, the only community I really had. And I had already started the stripping down process. So, in a sense, the medicine was an intensification of a process that I had chosen because, something must have driven me to that. And so I must have had some intuitive sense that I wasn't living the life that I really wanted to live.
Yeah. Yeah. The question actually was even a step before that. So I get that you needed them for you. you needed the medicine to help you see that level of awareness and clarity. But the question is more about, is there anything you could have imagined that would have inspired you to look? To question, do I need to do some healing work? Do I need to, or were you just so successful that there was nothing that was able to break through to help you be inspired to dig in a little deeper?
Well, the only thing I can think of is that I wasn't happy in my marriage, and I wasn't facing up to it.
Yeah.
But everything else was good. I had the life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there was people would have looked at my life and thought, you got what everybody wants.
Yeah. So, how many? I think I heard you've done 60 ayahuasca ceremonies. Is that right, or did I mishear that?
Yeah, I don't really keep count of them.
Yeah.
But I just kept. It became my path. So it was very intensive for 3 years, and so I went at it pretty hard. I don't know the exact number.
Okay. It's I'm just inspired by that level of commitment, whatever number it was clearly a level of commitment. And it brought you to a point. One of the highlights that stood out for me in hearing some of your ceremonies is getting to this point where you could see so clearly that you hadn't been living your authentic self or true self for 50 something years. And there was this utter, devastation of, I think it's about that. This hasn't been my life. I can't get over this. This hasn't been my life.
Yeah. Yeah. In one of these ceremonies, I actually saw in a flash how I constructed a false self in order to survive early childhood traumatic experiences, and I just instantly saw it all, and then realized that I kind of staggered out of the maloka where we were, and the words came to me: "My life has not been my own. My life has not been my own," and I couldn't get over it, And someone came out to get me because you're not supposed to leave, and it was the assistant shaman. And I told him, I said, I got to tell you, my life has not been my own, and I can't get over it. I can't get over it. And he just calmly looked at me and said, "You'll get over it. Come on back here." So, wise words.
Yeah. Can you say more about? Were you going to say something else there?
No, just it's pretty shocking to see this so clearly. I mean, there was also an aspect of it that was a bit humorous, actually. It was like there was a comic dimension to this tragedy of not living my own life. And I don't quite understand what it was about. Partly it was that, okay, I'm on to myself now, so I've got what? God willing, 20, 30 years left. I can live authentically now. So it was kind of a relief. And it was just also sort of the view from 60,000 feet, which said, boy, look what we can do with an entire life. Like look what our species can actually do. We can actually live in this kind of denial and repression for a long, long time. And for whatever reason, there was like a sense in which it wasn't the end of the world. It's just that what humans do.
Yeah.
It was like I gained some kind of eternal perspective on this tragedy. And it was a bit funny.
And how has it played out since then for you? How do you experience yourself differently with this awareness, and how's it being expressed in your life?
Well, it's not like all of a sudden, because you've had this experience in a ceremony, your life changes instantly. It's
Hmm.
like you get the insight, and the insight itself is dismantling. I
Yeah.
mean, it's huge. But then there's the whole process of integrating it, going back home, and actually having to uh, see how this plays out in the context of your own intimate relationship, for example, of all your relationships, because this is where the rubber hits the road. It's like you say you want to be a lover. Well, how are you doing with this? And so it's not like I instantaneously changed. I get
Yeah.
feedback still from my wife of how I'm showing up, and I can still be defensive about that, or I can drop the defensiveness when I become aware of it and take it in as information, as about data about how I'm showing up. And so I'm a little less inclined towards uh, fierce defensive posturing these days. I am
Yeah.
not, the bodhisattva yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate that. That's my experience too. That there's the insights, there's the ahas, there's the learning, and then there's going and taking it into your every day-to-day life. And
Yeah. And that's, I think, where the real work of this is. Sometimes I think that people go back again and again and again to these ceremonies because the insights are beautiful.
yeah.
They're feel world changing, but if they're not integrated, we just keep going back for more and more of the same.
Yeah.
And so it requires a process of really landing, putting your feet on the earth, and the hard work of implementing.
Yeah. You and I were both at that talk from Christopher Beisch at the conference, and I really Christopher Beisch is a retired philosophy professor who did 20 years of about 73 LSD journeys, big LSD journeys, and he's written a book called Diamonds from Heaven that's just coming out about that 20-year experience. And I found that talk incredibly inspiring and moving, and there was some pieces that really stood out for me. One of them was this, really affirmed my experience, but the sense of, or this experience he had of that there would be a breakthrough and then into a greater consciousness. And that was always followed by purification, I think is the word he used. And that was pretty excruciating. It sounded like he got to the point where he would dread the breakthrough because he knew it would be followed by the purification process. But he kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And I think it shifted in different ways. But I think of that. I think of everything from plant medicine I can apply directly to my life too. In that when I wanting to have a bigger consciousness and I do work to expand into it, there are things in my life that are purifying that I need to purify. Where's my, like, where am I in integrity with life, and what beliefs am I still holding on to? Where am I still going to default comfort zones or, coping strategies?
And it can be physical purification too. It's like
Right.
your this physical vessel needs to grow in the capacity for more subtle wisdom to contain more subtle wisdom.
Yeah.
So it's like I agree. It's like purification of physical, emotional, mental, spiritual levels, and I thought that was brilliant what Christopher was saying as well, Eric, when I heard that, because what I discovered, like I had this experience of a vision of some indigenous warriors inviting me to their campfire and initiating me into the order of the pure heart. And I thought to myself, well, great, now I'm going to be like have a purified heart. And it was so innocent because the purification process lasted, well, every time I do a ceremony,
Yeah.
the purification process begins. But I love, as you described, what Christopher said about you attain a new level, and then you have to go through the purification process again.
Yeah.
And I think Christians should be listening to this, because one of the Beatitudes, which is a series of Jesus' fundamental teachings, is Jesus saying, "Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God."
Right.
So build right into the lineage that this spiritual path is an ordeal. It's not for the faint of heart. But I think that's been lost in contemporary expressions of Christianity.
The purification of the heart.
Purification.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's this story of Jesus being, quote unquote, driven by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days and 40 nights, he's tempted by, the Satan, the regressive, the anti-life forces to the regressive alternative. He's tempted by power, he's tempted by status, he's tempted by wealth, and he has to establish that his heart's in a pure enough place in order to move into his next stage of ministry. So, maybe if every Christian went through this ayahuasca process, the church wouldn't be struggling more. I just think it needs to reclaim this aspect of ideal and purification.
Yeah. The other thing that stood out for me there was a lot, but in Christopher Bache's talk was the sense of, real pivotal moment for him was when he realized there was no end. He reached this state that was so crystalline or so diamond bright, big, can't remember the word he used, and then he was able to see the next sort of phase, and that was just as far as he had come. And
that's a brilliant insight. Because I think it's possible that, he admits that maybe he engaged this with a little too much intensity, the whole thing.
Yeah, he wouldn't recommend it for anybody, he said,
as if he was going to realize ultimate truth in this lifetime. And in a sense, I have a bit of more caution in me now than I did 3 or 4 years ago when I started in this, to really respect that this path is rigorous, and you need to give yourself time to recover and integrate.
Yeah.
And, sometimes we can be in too much of a hurry to just, look for the cure. I've been there.
Yeah. That other talk, Laurel Sugden, she talked about San Pedro, and I love one of the gems from that talk was, it's not about changing the world. It's not about changing yourself. It's about coming back into balance. And I feel that anything can be turned into a chase for something, including the healing work. And the integration is the balancing of that deep, deep work. And I find, I don't know, I'd be curious but I find that I start to have a deeper sense of intuition around what is the right balance. And then there's almost this, my dreams start telling me there's sort of synchronicities and, it's time to do another journey. And
I agree. I think there's a rhythm. You feel some kind of intuitive sense that, it's time to go back in. And, but through it all, I think it's healthy to have a little bit of patience as well with yourself. One of the effects of early trauma is that we we desperately try to change ourselves in the way that those who are responsible for us, our parents, we think they will serve us, you know, in terms of our, just to survive. And so we're constantly asking ourselves, what do I need to do? How do I need to change?
Yeah.
And so, you know, we can be a little more compassionate with ourselves, because sometimes that compulsion to change ourselves can be little more than a reenactment of our response to early trauma.
Yeah. The trauma and the belief that goes in with the trauma that I'm not enough, I'm not okay,
I'm not enough. Yeah.
I don't belong just as I am.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, you know, that I write about in the book at the end, is that in response to this experiences of heartbreak, which can happen very early in our life, we form these unconscious beliefs like, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm too much, I'm not enough,
Yeah.
it's my fault. You know, I came up with, for myself, I had formed 20 to 25 of these unconscious beliefs.
Yeah.
You know, and it's unbearable as a little kid. You can't actually bear these, the truth of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you know, that's when we were talking about the false self or the adapted self. We construct that in order to compensate for,
to protect us from.
Yeah.
And all of that is in this book. And one of the things I really appreciate about what I know is in this book, I haven't read it all yet, but also from your talk, is this both and, that, you know, the plant medicine, psychedelic journeys, and the integration into how do I know myself now in terms of my core unconscious beliefs, and how can I see now more clearly how I'm operating from the compensatory beliefs and and behaviors and so on. And because without the taking away and putting into real life practice, it becomes the spiritual bypass realm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it can help to be accompanied by, you know, a therapist, someone who knows the terrain, because our hearts were broken in the context of intimate relationship, and our hearts are ultimately healed. I mean, these various medicines, these psychedelics, can show us, that's the meaning of the term psychedelic, is mind revealing.
Right.
Show us all of what's in the mind. And once we've seen, it's ultimately a quality of a relationship in which I can regain the capacity to trust another human being with my deepest self, where the healing lies.
Yeah.
So it's all about regaining trust that life is for us.
Yeah. I'm smiling because your video went away for a while. It was not, there was just some blank screen there. And just as you said, it's revealing us, you came back into it. So.
Yeah.
Is there anything, you know, you've done a lot of the ceremony with the shaman and the chanting and the purging and assistance and so on. And you've done quite a bit of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, one-on-one, while you're on a psychedelic with a therapist.
Yeah.
I like both. And I'm wondering if there's anything you want to say about the difference, but also if someone's listening to this and they've never tried psychedelics either, and they're inspired to, anything you want to say to them?
Well, in relation to the first question, one of the differences I experienced in the ayahuasca ceremonies, at least in the kind of ceremony that I participate in, you don't get a lot of support. The medicine will take you right into your trauma.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's all about learning self-reliance. Like, you need to be able to contain yourself. And that can be good, and that can be not so good. And I know increasingly there are new kinds of ceremonies coming online where people are recognizing this and providing a little more one-on-one support for people when they go to these really deep, open places.
Yeah.
I think it's good. My experience of psychedelic psychotherapy is that it was more about the relationship, where I was healing trust issues, attachment issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Realizing that someone could be there and really want to be there for me, that I belong, that
Yeah.
who saw my intrinsic beauty and could love me, and kind of in the context of relationship, healed those core unconscious beliefs
Yeah.
that I had carried for so long.
I have a theory that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead and finish there. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I was going to shift, so let's
I have
follow up.
I have a theory that in the Western world, there's so much pain around loss of bonds with family, but also tribe and community, that it's no wonder there's this psychotherapeutic psychedelic thing emerging, as opposed to, I think traditionally it was always done as a group with the shaman, but that was in groups of people who had a deep sense of belonging already. They weren't trying to heal the fact that they weren't loved and accepted, because they were part of a tribe and they knew it. And
Yeah. Well, in the traditional ayahuasca ceremonies too, it was always the shaman who took the medicine, not the people. The shaman revealed where the community was out of whack and what the community needed to do.
Oh.
So it's relatively new that everybody's
Right.
taking medicine, not just the shamans. But I think you're right. There maybe wasn't as much personal trauma in the village setting.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much for me, I believe, in the fact that we're living isolated family experiences with generally in the Western world, no elders, no rites of passage, none of the things that give us the deep sense of belonging and being known and cared about it.
Yeah,
There's a lot of trauma in that alone. And I think, anyway, maybe that's why, one of the big, there is definitely more self-reliance and ceremony, but one of the big things is to ask for help. You can ask for help, right? And the assistant comes, or they'll take you up and you'll get a one-on-one chant or something. And even though it's not the therapeutic process realm, it's huge to be able to ask for help and feel someone come to you in your most difficult moments.
Yeah, that was a major dynamic for me in those ceremonies too, was just realizing the extent to which I'd learned to be self-sufficient. And for the longest time, I just couldn't cry out for help.
Yeah.
I was lying there suffering and I wouldn't go, help, somebody help me.
Yeah.
And it spoke volumes.
Yeah. So back to the...
Yeah, in terms of your second question.
Yeah.
Regarding sort of any, how to approach these if somebody's sort of new to these various medicines. And, everybody in these circles are talking about set and setting. And I think that's important to keep in mind. You hear stories about people who just kind of go off and take this stuff on their own. And I recently heard, a story of somebody who had done that and got into a really bad place. The setting wasn't right. His mindset was wrong. There was someone with him, but the person had no experience and was completely over his head. And it ended up in a really potentially devastating place. So approach the medicine with great respect. Be clear about your intentions going in. Make sure if you're going into a ceremony that you really trust the shaman, or you trust the guide or the therapist that is with you. So,
Mm-hmm.
and when it is, those conditions are met, set and setting are in place. It's a very gracious. It can be a very gracious experience, very healing experience, as you know.
Yeah. There's also microdosing now. I'm seeing benefits of one-on-one work with smaller doses that, my experience is they help us go into the body a little more and open up things, not to the same depths, but they're a starting place for people, I think, to test the
Yeah,
waters.
yeah, lots being done now with microdosing.
Yeah.
There's a podcast called The Third Wave, which is totally about microdosing,
Right.
all its dimensions, um, and I think it's really well done.
Third wave. I'll just type that in here.
Thirdwave.com. Yeah.
A couple other questions I had for you. One of the things you said at one of the last talks I heard from you was that you often felt cold in your body, if I remember this right, and you realized it was because there was some block in you around being all in meaning fully committed to your life.
Yeah.
Did I remember that right?
Yeah, that specific insight came. It was around being in a ceremony and just dropping into a place of compassion for myself, and I felt how cold my feet were and how cold my hands were, and so I started warming my feet very tenderly, and then I had memories of my father between periods playing hockey outdoors in Winnipeg, and
Mm-hmm.
they were numb with cold, and he'd come in and rub them. It was a very positive, warm experience
Yeah.
of my father, and so I just felt deep tenderness towards myself. And the insight was that I moved through life so quickly without making contact with
Yeah.
the world. My feet didn't really feel the earth, my hands didn't really feel the connection with nature or with other human beings, and I transitioned very quickly. And I transitioned very quickly from one moment to the next because I had been hurt uh, when I was in the context of deep intimacy. And so I learned not to linger
Yeah.
in my experience and not really be, as you say, present, be all in.
Yeah.
And the connection was made. Oh, that's why my hands and feet are cold. And then during another ceremony, I was given 4 practices, life practices, one of which was move at the pace of life, no faster, no slower. And this was all about making contact by slowing, mostly for me, slowing down.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I that really stood out for me. I resonate with all of those things you've just shared and how hard it is for me to slow down. I have a meditation practice, but pretty much every time I'm about to meditate, there's a voice in me trying to convince me I don't have time, or, to do a short one, or, yeah.
Yeah, it can be as simple as when I'm in my kitchen and the drawers and the shelves when they close they make a really big noise and it's kind of unpleasant. And so slowing down for me, a practice is just to not let them slam.
Yeah.
Just stay with the drawer until they're almost just closed, and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But usually I'm just like slamming them shut, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's a kind of a daily practice, just noticing how quickly my movements are.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I believe most of us have a fear of slowing down, and that's why we're always packing our lives so full and trying to squeeze out the things that are hard to feel in the slowing down, which, for most of us is the loss of the connection, the bond, the deep sense of belonging that we didn't get to have.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, we just keep moving. Like if we stop, whatever it is whatever it is that's sneaking up on us is going to catch up to us.
Yeah.
Usually it's our shadow. You know, for me it's sadness, sorrow.
Yeah.
You know, I needed to keep moving for that thing, which was kind of broken-hearted sorrow that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
Was going to catch up.
Which reminds me of one of the parts that you read from your book at Banyan, I think. One of the poem that you read at the end, and there was a beautiful piece about grief as a wise old woman or something like that. And,
Yeah,
let her lead you now, or was it, am I remembering that closely?
yeah, yeah. No, that's it. There's a whole piece on grief coming and taking your hand. She's too wise to feel sorry for you.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Lovely.
take you down into it.
Yeah.
The, the life, the life we've lost in the living is in the grief.
Yeah. So true. I'm just going to see if I have any other questions I wanted to make sure I covered. That's pretty much all I have. So just to draw this to a close, you're now well, you always were a therapist, but now that's your thing. You're a practicing therapist. You're seeing people by Skype, but also in your home in Denman. And could you say more about how your work looks now?
Yeah, well, exactly. People are making pilgrimages to the island to do intensive journeys, um, and I'm doing work by Skype or Zoom or Appear In or whatever the platform is. Um, so
Yeah.
that's
I have been there. I have made my pilgrimage, and you know, you're talking earlier about giving it all to Great Mother, I think, or yeah.
yeah,
And that was a huge part of my ceremony at your place, was that exact thing, that it's okay to give her all of it, including the
yeah.
shame and the whatever, the fullest of it, that she could really, that was a whole tightrope for me to walk for a while, like really, 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 and just staying with it, having really good support, and
Yeah.
giving myself fully. Yeah, I had a couple ceremonies where that was just huge. And
Oh, beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do people find you? What's your website?
Bruce Sanguin, my name, .ca.
Bruce Sanguin. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad we did it. Yeah, part of me, there's parts of me that are scared to do this kind of thing, and part of me is really on fire for it. And thanks for, we had a few different scheduling technical things, and I was starting to lose a little hope, and then you said on the phone, we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Staying with it.
Yeah. Good. Well, great job. It was really great to talk to you, Eric, about this stuff. And anytime.
Thank you. I know you're very busy, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're more than welcome.
Take good care.
Yeah, take care, Eric. Bye-bye.